Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. A couple of actual topics today to wander around, circle around the subjects. First of all, the meeting yesterday, Orchid Society of Great Britain. Lynn and I agreed that it was interesting but didn't necessarily come into the category of enjoyable. And a lot of that is just how far away it is. 2.5 hours drive for me, hour and a half for Lynn, because I'm an hour away from Lynn in the first place. So you know, it's a fair way to go. And the whole meeting, we decided, as it's such a long way to go, in the morning was a new members morning. With a talk and what have you. Fair enough. In the afternoon was the auction, which is really what Lynn wanted to go for, and I wanted to just go to one of their meetings. I've been a member for a while, but not long after joining the world closed down, didn't it? So anyway, we went along. The talk was on Phalaenopsis, and afterwards there was a repotting demonstration, followed by have a go yourself if you want to. They had a load of sort of plants ready to go so that you could have a go yourself, sort of thing. We didn't join in with that. We did sit in on the talk, although I ventured off on frequent occasions. They made a silly mistake with me, you know, so they obviously don't know me very well. The catering staff were on holiday, so the venue, at the last minute, we found this out literally the day before, on Friday, that the catering staff weren't going to be there. So what they could do was provide tea and coffee Blue Peter style, in other words, do it yourself. So that's what they did. Obviously that had to be paid for, so what they decided to do was you buy a ticket when you get there. So you pay your, I think it was £2 for your ticket, and then you help yourself to tea and coffee and biscuits all day long. Wrong! I'd had 3 before the dust settled. Just walking around with a cup of coffee all day long. Anyway, so we took our own lunch and that sort of thing, which was a shame. It would have been nice to have had a sit-down, meal sort of served, but I'll say this. Didn't find out till the last minute, so be it. The auction in the afternoon, there were some very interesting plants there. There was only one plant that I sort of remotely fancied, and so did Lynn. So we'd have been bidding against each other, which would have been stupid. So I said, I tell you what, you go for it, see if you get it, and I'll have a bit, down the line a bit. The only reason it was interesting was it was a dendrobium. It was basically made up of 3 species, one of which was Dendrobium nobile, the actual species, although quite a low percentage. So yeah, 3 species. So that must have been like a primary crossed with another species to get 3, yeah, something like that anyway. But it went for more than Lynn was prepared to pay. But there were some good quality plants there. There were also lots of plants that went for far too much money, but then that's up to the individuals buying them to do the research and find out. Basically, there were lots of Restrepias for sale, including species, but basically there were like 2 or 3 leaves in a pot, very, very small divisions, and they were going for like £8–10. You can get a much better sized plant at Burnham's for the same amount of money, and hand pick it out of a group. So, but then not everybody could get to Burnham's, you have to bear that in mind. I met a few YouTubers, came and said hello. For some strange reason I didn't expect to meet any at the Orchid Society of Great Britain. I don't know what got that, how that got in my head, but anyway, yeah, so a few people came and said hello. That was nice. It's always nice to meet the people who follow the channel, even if it's only just to say hello. So that was that. What else? Nothing really, that's all I've got to say about that. Come next year when the auction comes round, I may go again, you know. But the problem was, it was the variety of plants was quite good, but they were either plants that I just don't grow or I've already got. There wasn't anything there that took my fancy. There was some nice maxillarias. Well, I've had several of those in the past and got fed up with them, you know. Anyway, so that was that. There was hardly any oncidiums there at all. I didn't see any intergenerics, that type of thing. You know, perhaps people just don't grow that much. Didn't really come across Masdevallias and Draculas to any extent. So there was a lot of Restrepias there, and a few other types of Chlorothalids, but only 2 or 3 Cattleyas out of a whole lot. Yeah, it's a strange mix. So that was that. Everything in bloom tomorrow, the 8th. I'll try and remember, because it is the 8th tomorrow. So we'll try and get that done. That'll be a short video. But there are still some things in bloom, but fundamentally it's the things that were already in bloom last month. There isn't much new that's come out, if anything. But we'll do it anyway, yeah, that's how it goes. So that's that. Right, subject today, it's 2 subjects that cross over. I get asked a lot, literally over a long period of time, what orchids are best suited to mounts and what orchids do better in pots. There is no answer. The answer is you. You. What is you? What are you going to contribute to this discussion? Because I can't tell you. You know, at the end of the day, if it's an epiphyte, you can mount it. Will it do well on a mount? It comes back to you. It will do well on a mount if you can deal with it being on a mount. You know, you can put that on a mount if you like, but when it's growing actively like this, that's going to need watering 2, maybe 3 times a day. You won't get away with once a day. It'll use that water up so fast. So yes, it can be mounted, but what you have to decide is it the best idea for that plant and the way you're going to be able to look after it? Because that's the thing with mounted orchids, you've got to put effort in. You can't say, oh, I can only water once a week. You do that with mounts, you'll have dead orchids, especially if you've got hot weather. So, can I mount my orchid? The answer will always be yes. Should I mount this particular orchid? Just the orchid itself, I would say, well, yes. It'll do fine, but you'll have to do the work. That's the thing, and that's where I think the line comes in, and that's the bit that keeps people are asking the question without taking that bit into consideration, and that's the bit you should be thinking about first, before you even think about buying some cork bark. Can I look after mounts? Is the environment the mount is going to be growing in suitable for a mounted orchid? Because in the home, you tend to have warmer temperatures throughout the year. You don't get the colder periods. That may or may not be relevant, but what you do tend to get is dry air. Now that's not good. Mounted orchids, you've deprived them of the evaporation of the water in the media in the pot coming up around the plant, which people forget about that. You know, when you water a big pot like this, that's giving off moisture off the top of that media around the plant. Yeah? So think of the environment and your ability to look after it before you decide to strap everything on a piece of bark of some description. Now I'll just make a little exception and put my coffee down. I must remember to mention that I've had a complaint. If you use something like this, which somebody sent this to me, I didn't buy this, I'd never thought to use it, but now I am using it just for this one plant. This holds a lot of moisture. This is not cork bark, this is tree fern. Therein lies a solution to drier air. because if you start using something like this holds a lot of moisture, and that moisture is going to be given off, it's going to be evaporating all around this plant. So that's a way to possibly go down that path. But that stuff's not going to last forever, and when it starts to go over, it just falls apart apparently. So your mount would disintegrate in time. I'm just trying it, somebody sent it to me, and so I'm using it as a let's see how it does. So that's that. Right, let's just briefly stop. I've had a complaint. I did a video and I had a nice glass of chilled white wine, and I never touched it for the whole video, I just held it. Somebody said, you could at least go cheers or do something with it, why are you holding it? I was holding it because I came out to do something in the grow room with the wine. When I started filming, I picked it up, because what you tend to forget, most of the time when the video starts is not when the camera starts filming. I'm normally, well, I'll give you an example of the start of a video that you don't see. First of all, it starts like this. That's me turning the camera on. And then it's me trying to sort out where I'm going to stand and getting myself sort of comfortable. Is the camera at the right height and this like that? And then you get, hi, this is Roger. So you don't get that bit. You don't see that bit. And that's the bit where I had the wine in my hand and I just didn't put it down. And you notice I've got a coffee in my hand. Have you seen me drink any of it yet? No. I will. Because I don't want another complaint. Yeah, but yes, somebody did actually mention you've often got a drink in your hand and you never drink it. That's just probably more true than not. I tend to hold it, and I've explained why in the past, but as new people, if I haven't got anything in my hands, I do this. I wring my hands. And when I watch the video back to make sure there's no boo-boos, I don't like seeing me do that. So, now I'm not doing it. It's the other reason I've got a cup in my hand. Nothing to do with what's in it. It stops me wringing my hands. It's an annoying habit I've got that I don't like. Most people probably didn't even notice it until I mentioned it, but I don't like it. And I can't stop it. I've tried, I can put my hands in my pockets, but when you're filming that's probably a bit rude, isn't it? Right, so can I mount my orchid? Simple answer, yes. But my question, which would immediately follow, is can you look after it when you put it on said mount? Is there anything you can't mount? Well, terrestrials aren't going to be doing so good on a mount because you haven't got the right media. It's like that, right? And then that moves on. I've just used the word media. What media is suitable for what orchids? Again, if we go back to the fact we're talking about epiphytes, they'll grow in anything. But is that the best thing for that plant and how you're going to look after it? So you get things like the rockwool, yeah? I mean, I can't use that, I'm allergic to the flipping stuff. There is a plant in here that's in it, and I'm dreading having to repot it. I should probably just run it under the tap and hope it all comes off. Block the sink. But the traditional media for pots, for orchids, is just bark, you know. And you buy it in different grades. Big grade, chunky stuff, medium and small. And you can mix, you know, you can have some medium and some small. Sort of halfway between the two, that sort of thing. You've got the moss, the zombie moss that you can buy, dried moss that you can use, but it will go off, and when it goes off it will take your roots down if you don't deal with it. So you're going to repot more often if you use moss. And let's put it this way, you should repot more often if you use moss, and if you use moss when you repot, you're not going to damage your roots. Now, this is a bonus that a lot of people forget. You can literally hold your plant under your tap and wash it off. And just pick at it gently under the tap and it'll all come off and you haven't damaged your roots. So the stress level to the plant is low especially if you then put it straight back in moss. The stress to the plant is negligible, but you've got to put the work in. Because if you don't, that stuff will start going off, and when it does, it turns acidic, holds more moisture than it did when it was newer, so it starts staying wet longer. And if you've got plants in there, I mean, somebody asked me, can I grow a cattleya in moss? Well, yes, as long as you've got temperatures and it dries quickly. If it's going to stay wet and you've got cooler temperatures, your roots will rot. It's not the ideal media for that environment. But yeah, you can grow cattleyas in moss, you can grow anything in moss. You know, some plants actually prefer that environment. If you take the cloud forests, things like a lot of the Dracula species, they you know, I've seen film now and photos, so I've sort of seen this, you know, in the situ. And you've got, in the cloud forest, everything's dripping wet all the time. And this is a thing that you can't replicate, you can't do it. Because that water that's running down everything and everything's wet is fresh, clean water. It's not recycled, it's not been sat in the pot a week, it's always fresh, clean water coming from the mist and the fog and the rain. It's clean, it's clear. That's an environment that's very, very difficult to recreate. So, you know. But as a consequence of all this moisture and everything, lots of the moss and stuff like that is hanging off the branches. And a lot of the Draculas are growing on that moss. They're not on the branch or the tree trunk. They're hanging in the moss, and that's all they've got. They're just about hanging on to something. And I would imagine there are times when some of them actually break free because the plant's got bigger and they just fall down on the ground. And they may or may not make it when that happens, you know. But yeah, so moss is still a good thing to use, but you've got to do the work again. You've got to refresh it and not let it get old and stale. And it turns acidic and you end up, you've created an alien environment for the roots. And this is reverse. This is going back the other way. So your roots in that environment have sort of become acclimatized to it because it's a relatively slow process. And they've sort of just about got used to it, and the plant's just about living as a consequence. And then you take that environment away and give it lovely, fresh, clean moss, and your roots die. You sort of think, well, why? It's because you changed stuff. You changed the environment the roots were in, and it's a shock. And even though you made it better for them, you shouldn't have let it get bad in the first place. That's the important bit. Don't let it get like that, then you haven't got a change when you repot. And that even applies to bark. You know, bark can start breaking down and start getting crumbly and soggy, and there's far less air gaps, and it's starting to compress, and it holds water for a much, much longer time. And if it holds water for a long time, it'll hold nutrients as well if the plant hasn't used them up. Yeah? And you've now got a relatively hostile environment. And any new roots that come out will hopefully just about acclimatise to that and put up with it until you take them out of that alien environment and put them in some nice clean bark, and then the roots die. It's the change they don't like. Yeah. So anyway, so I mean, there's loads of other types of media, but as I said, trying to go into every single one is daft, because it's easier to say that epiphytes will probably grow in anything, providing it's not toxic, you don't let it get toxic over time, and you water at an appropriate rate for that media. Now, if you've got something like, I mean, everybody likes referring back to Rick L. And now he grew outside. I mean, he did bring some stuff in for the winter. He had a room full of Phalaenopsis at one point, I remember. And do you know what stuck in my mind more than anything? One of his Phalaenopsis had 8 spikes. What are you feeding them on? Whatever, but whatever it was, it worked. And it did vary from different types of plants and things. He didn't feed everything with the same stuff. But a lot of his plants outside, things like his cattleyas and stuff like that, were grown in stones. Now, they got rained on as well, and they got watered an awful lot. simply because in a warm environment like that, if you threw a bucket of water on a cattleya in a pot full of stones, in half an hour it could be bone dry. The evaporation rate would be high and there's no water retention at all. So if you want to use an environment like that, great, roots will love it. But you're going to have to do the work. You know, you're going to have to walk around with the hose many times in a day. So you tend to think, well, hang on, if I don't use stones, what else could I use that's like stones, so there's lots of air, but holds some water? So then you get into the likes of leca, or the, you know, the clay balls, that type of stuff. Pumice, that has some water retention. So you've still got the air gaps, but you're holding some more moisture longer. So you reduce your workload, you reduce the amount of watering you're going to have to do. There's another topic, as we're heading for yet another heat wave. We've only just got rid of one and we've still had no rain in between. And now we're going to have another one. Driest July on record, and there's no foreseeable rain in the south of England for August, for all of it. That's what we're trying to deal with. I was talking to Lynn. She's used all her rainwater, she's got none left. And what her husband's helped her do now is if they fix the RO unit up to fill the water barrels up because they haven't got rainwater. And he's rigged it so that the waste from the RO unit goes in the end rain barrel so it can be used on the garden. Because they've got a hose pipe back, not allowed to get the hose out. And no rain. It's just getting silly. But as I said, therein lies another thing. If you go for a media that doesn't hold moisture, you're going to water an awful lot more frequently. Have you got that water? Or are you going to run out? Yeah? So that's another thing to consider. But the media you choose, there should be some consideration of the plant roots. What sort of plant are we talking about? Now, if you're in the pleurophalids arena, Restrepias, well, in my case, Restrepias, Masdevallias and Draculas, those are the only pleurophalids I've got. They like to stay moist. They like to head towards dryness, but never quite get there. Which is sometimes difficult to achieve, especially if you're new and, you know, it's all a bit new. But they like to stay moist. Evenly moist is an expression that's used far too frequently and cannot exist. Because when you water the plant, it's not evenly moist, it's soaking wet. And then it gradually dries off until at some point, if you leave it long enough, it's bone dry. So there is no evenly moist. It goes from one end to the other as a progression. And somewhere in the middle, the media is evenly moist. But it was wetter the day before and it won't be as wet the day after. So it's not the same. It doesn't stay evenly moist. Anyway, so I would choose, like for a Masdevallia, I wouldn't choose great big chunky bark, for instance. That's too much air and will dry far too fast for that type of plant. So I'd go towards the smaller end, small bark, perhaps with some charcoal, perhaps with some grow stones. You know, I might put other stuff in with that bark, but it's the grade. You know, what you're doing is you're basically saying, I want far less air, smaller gaps, so that there'll be more moisture retention. And quite honestly, Masdevallias do brilliantly in moss most of the time, providing you change it frequently and don't let it get stale. You can grow Miltoniopsis in moss, they'd love it. But the hint of staleness, the slightest bit of acidity that starts, and you're going to lose your roots. You might not lose them then, but you're more likely to lose them when you change the media, because it's the stress level of the change that does them in. Yeah. So, which media you choose is up to you. It is your choice, but I would suggest you think about how you are looking after your orchids. What is your ability to water and feed? And if that ability is limited because you're a working person, and nowadays working people don't just do a couple of hours a day, they tend to work their whatnot off and often happen to do 6 days, not just 5. You know, the 9 to 5 jobs, they just don't seem to be around anymore. You know, it's normally 9 to 5 unless you've got outstanding work, in which case you need to stay till 7. Sorry, that's just how it is. Yeah, so, you know, if you're a working person, the time available to deal with your orchids is limited. So choose well. Choose something that can put up with that amount of care. I won't say lack of care, because that's still care, it just doesn't happen often. Whereas like me, I can offer care in one shape or another every single day, unless, like yesterday, I was away for the day. But I could have got the sprayer out before I left. I could have offered something. I could have done something when I got home. You know, I could have remounted something, or you know, whatever. I could have, but didn't. So try and gear things up to your the amount of effort you can put in yourself to look after your plants. And therein is another factor that you need to consider. Given that amount of time and effort that you can put in, limit your number of orchids to that. And don't start going mad, because you'll end up getting frustrated because you can't put enough time and effort in. You may start seeing some of your plants suffering, and then you get upset with the whole thing. It's better to have fewer than too many, because if you've got fewer, they'll end up with extra care, won't they? Doesn't mean extra watering, it means extra checking, you know. And that was another thing, bugs. Lots of people were discussing, I could overhear conversations and things at this event yesterday, and lots of people have said that the mealybugs are bad this year, and quite a few people have said, yeah, I've got them this year, I've never had them before. Where do they come from? Well, it's funny, there are so many people that haven't thought that they can come from outside. Most of the time they come in on a plant, you know. They just do. You might do a good look at the plant when you buy it. Well, a lot of the time, you know, if you're buying online, you don't even get a chance to look at it till it arrives home. And then, well, that's all right, I quarantine. Yeah, well, you can quarantine for how long? 2 weeks? 4 weeks? 6 weeks? And you may still get some eggs hatch out at the end of that. So, a lot of the time they just come in on other plants. The guy who did the talk on Phalaenopsis was one of the senior committee members, I can't remember who it was doing some filming of the talk, if you see what I mean. And the guy doing the talk, he said, I'm going to do something quite dangerous now, and he had a polythene bag with the top tied. And he untied it and got a plant out covered in mealybugs, in a meeting where there's an auction of orchids. And you say, well, that's all right, they were sealed in a bag. No, they weren't. You can't tie something up like that and make it mealybug proof. And when he took it out, how many got knocked off? How many fell onto the table or onto the floor? Did the table get wiped off properly? Were other orchids put on that table later on? So yes, it was a dangerous thing to do. And it went back in the bag, and the bag was tied up again. But it brought them into the room. That was the thing. And I thought that was for an event like that, I thought it was a bit iffy. But then none of my plants were in the place, so it wasn't my specific worry. So that yellow leaf on my Jenkinsii has been driving me up the wall. It's glowing yellow in that sort of darker area. Anyway, so always think about the amount of care you can offer and tailor your collection from 1 to silly numbers to that care, so that you don't overstretch, because when you overstretch, things will start not working as well as they should. You'll miss things, and it will start getting a chore. And instead of, oh, let's go and water my plants, it'll be, oh, I've got to water the plants now, I wanted to do this. It'll get in the way, it'll start getting in the way of your other things in your life. And that's when it starts getting a chore, and it's no longer an enjoyable hobby. So don't let it get like that in the first place. I've done it. I've got like that around the other place. I got to the point where I used to open that door and think, oh, I've got to do all this again today. Oh. You know, I haven't got as many orchids now as I had then, and the ones I've got don't necessarily need as much care as some of those did back then. So, I mean, the one thing I haven't got to cope with that I had back then is the heat. So although we're having heat waves and everything, my worry is what's outside, not what's in here. I can cope with what's in here in the heat. I mean, when I came down this morning, the temperature in here was 16 degrees on that one. It was 15 on that one, so it was around 15, 16 degrees. So that's where it dropped down to overnight. And today, when the sun finally gets round and comes out from behind the tree and comes over the house, it'll be on this roof for about 3 hours and then it'll be gone again. And during that 3-hour period, I'll get up to about 26, 27 degrees, and that's my top whack now that the sun's not on that roof for as long, and it's getting less and less every day, to the point where eventually there will be no sun on the roof, and I'll probably be lucky to get up above 23, 24 in here. And discussing with Lynn yesterday, with the predicted expense of the winter and heating, I've decided I'm dropping my temperature right down this winter, and there will be some that probably don't make it as a consequence. There will be some that don't like it and shut down and stop growing, or slow down to the extent where you can't even see them growing. There will be some that absolutely love it. So this winter is a thinning out process. Those that do okay through this winter will still be here in the spring. Those that don't, won't. And I don't care what comes and goes, because I can't afford that level of money for that level of heating. As I said, I kept it at 15, 16 degrees last winter, so I'm going down to 12. That's the bottom end of intermediate, the bottom end. And there'll be some things that don't like it. I can predict the black hair type dendrobiums will stop growing. Phalaenopsis type dens will stop growing. Some of the cattleyas will either slow right down or stop. They'll come back. I don't think they'll die. Things that could die, my Phalaenopsis that's in here on a mount, that will come out. And my little Phalaenopsis species, the Violacea that Zena gave to me that's in here at the moment, both of those will have to go in the house. They won't take that level of cold. So those two will come out, or they will probably not make it. Most of the Oncidium types should be alright. They're all classed as intermediate. All the cool growers, Miltoniopsis, Masdevallias, Dracula, Restrepias, they'll be fine. They'll love it. The two Vandas are not going to be happy, not at all. They'll probably make it, but they might lose leaves, and if they lose leaves, they're less of a plant next year, aren't they? My Delicatum might actually bloom as a consequence, because that's one that just will not bloom because I can't get it cold enough. And I can't be doing with coming in and out this door with plants each day. I'm not mucking about like that. The Cymbidiums, the two Cymbidiums outside, they'll be back in for the winter. They'll be fine at that temperature. And from the visit to the Mathers Foundation, my spikes on those Cymbidiums, the embryos are already forming now. It said towards the end of July into August, the night temperatures drop. That triggers the formation of the embryo spike. Now that spike might not even show for another 6 to 8 weeks, but it's formed in the summer when the night temperatures change, and that's as the days start to shorten. They might be later doing that this year because of the heat wave. And how cool is it going to be at night? So yeah, so that's what's going to happen, and I'm not getting the lights out Just carry on with the normal day length, everything as it is, and then as we get out the other side of Christmas and into the new year, I'll think about the new year. And that new year might consist of starting the season early by getting the lights out. Yeah? So, you know, have a look at the day lengths and sort of think, well, I could start things growing by introducing the lights and taking the day length up a bit at a time to where they would be comfortable with it, 12 hours a day. That would do. 13 or 14 would be better, but again, it's power. I'm using power for the lights. And unfortunately, to make that work well, that extra light and increasing the day lengths, which triggers growth, should be accompanied by an increase in temperature during the day as well. Well, I might be able to manage an extra degree or two. We'll see how it goes. So that's the plans. Anyway, so, you know, go back to the basic sort of principles. Can I mount my orchid? The simple answer will always be yes. Should I mount my orchid? Again, I'm not going to give you the answer. You've got to get the answer yourself, because you've got to work out, when I've mounted my orchid, can I give it the care and attention it's going to need, which it might not necessarily have needed while it was in the pot. You may have got away with once a week care and attention in the pot. You won't get away with it on a mount, certainly not in a home. And again, mounts in a home in the dry air are not going to do as well as they would in a more humid atmosphere. Now there are ways of bumping up the humidity for a part of your home, but that you're now starting to think about dedicating an area for the plants, which is not necessarily conducive to the humans. Anyway, that'll do for me today. I have got a bit of watering to do today. I will be mixing up low-level feed and applying it to the mounts with the sprayer, because they didn't get done yesterday, and I think it was pretty warm yesterday. But I mean, I didn't get home till 7:30 in the evening, so you know, I was out for 12 hours. I certainly wasn't going to start watering at that time of day, so we'll see how we go. But yeah, I mean, at the moment I've got some good growth going on, but it's growth that should have been at that stage 6 weeks ago. It's just late. So we'll see how long it goes on for, or whether it starts to shut down early because the day lengths start to shorten and the day and night temperatures start to go down. We'll have to wait and see. That's how it's going to be. So, I'll add on the end of this one, suggestions for videos in the comments section, please. I do this every now and again, and I normally get a good response. I get a list of topics that I might be able to, I might not be able to use all of them, but if you don't put the suggestion in there, I'm not going to do it, am I? That would be pure coincidence. But yeah, have you got suggestions of a video that you think would be useful to people, not just an answer to your one question, then by all means, you know, put a suggestion in the comments. I'm always willing to have a think about the suggestions, and you know, some of them I sort of think, oh, that's brilliant, yeah, I'll have a go at that, and others I think, I don't think that's worth doing, you know. So, but if the suggestion's not there, I can't give it any thought, can I? So put some suggestions in, that would be nice. Quick update for those that are interested, that's you two over in the corner there. Yeah, the rest of you can go now if you like. Update on the bonsai channel. My watch hours have to get up to 4,000. I'm up to 3,600 and I can see it moving. Yeah. My subscribers need to get to 1,000 and I'm up to 780. Unfortunately, I think the last 220 are going to be a lot more difficult to get. So I'll ask again, if you haven't popped across to the bonsai channel and subscribed, it would be greatly appreciated if you could do so. And I really don't mind if you never visit that channel ever again. But to go over and subscribe is doing me a big favour and helping out with the overall thing that's Roger's Orchids and Roger's Bonsai. and Roger's expensive flipping house with the conservatory and the orchid collection in it. Yeah, so the whole thing, to keep the whole thing going. If I can get that other channel up and running and contributing some pennies, it's a bonus. So anyway, I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. And enjoy your orchids. Don't forget to do that, will you?